Hello, and thank you for joining us this lunchtime for the UnWork Series. We'd be delighted to be hosting this series of In Conversation, which is focused on trying to support you in navigating these, what we would all agree are totally unprecedented times. As I'm sure you know, this series will focus on workplace, technology, and everything in between, such as the joys of biophilic design for all of you budding gardeners out there, to the importance of coffee. And I can certainly tell you that from my perspective, I have got value for money out of my new coffee machine, and I don't think it's ever been used so much. So my name is Susan Nash. I'm a director at Resonate Interiors. And today I'm joined by Imogen Privett, who's a workplace innovation consultant at UnWork, and Pernille Stafford, the founder and principal of Resonate Interiors. Hello both, how are we today?
Very well, thank you, Susan.
Very good, thanks.
Great. So this week's theme is centred around uncomfortable, and our conversation today will focus on how the current situation has pushed us completely out of our comfort zones into, well, what is quite frankly the unknown, and how we can navigate this from a design perspective. We also have with us Sasha Tinson, Development Director at UnWork, who is monitoring any questions. So do feel free to post these using the Q&A session, which you'll find the button below. And hopefully we can pick up on these. So whilst we only have 30 minutes, we really do mean sort of any questions. It's meant to be an open, relaxed and informal discussion. So no question is foolish. So fire away. Anyway, so ladies, let's get started. Our theme today is uncomfortable. And if anything, though, some people might be feeling extremely comfortable in their own home. No commute to contend with, for example. Do you think it will be difficult when restrictions are lifted to bring people back into the office? Pernille, we'll start with you for this one.
Hi, hello everyone. Pernille Stafford from Resonate. I think people will feel a sort of bittersweet anticipation about going back to work. For myself, I've missed my colleagues and I'm really looking forward to that interaction, seeing them and the buzz of the office. But I also think there is an apprehension and a nervousness about the commute and the travel, hygiene levels and proximity of other people. We're becoming used to this social distancing. So going back to the office is going to be an interesting journey for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Imogen, your thoughts, your take on that as well?
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the interesting things that we're seeing is that industries that have always sort of said that it's too difficult for various reasons to get people working from home to any significant degree are really just having to demonstrate that it can be done. And I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to justify not giving people that kind of flexibility in the future. So I think that's sort of an interesting element, kind of looking at working patterns moving on from this. In terms of bringing people back into the office, it probably depends partly on what your situation is working at home. And I'm lucky enough to have a room in which I can hide away from any distractions, but not everyone has that capability.
No, absolutely. So I guess for anyone in the workplace, the key question is what does come next? Like we've mentioned, we're all in completely uncharted territory and having to learn and react as we go. So how might these forced shifts in working patterns change the space of office interiors? Pernille, we'll go to you for this one.
Okay, I think individually people are going to look for more space. We've in the last few years we've got used to a sort of 1400 desk footprint being the normal, and I think we may go back to a larger desk and have a 2-meter desk, but I think we'll have less of them. I think larger companies will probably take less real estate, but have more space per person and more space to navigate around. But ultimately, the office is definitely not dead. We all want to go back and communicate and collaborate. And I think the office will become our heart space where we learn and exciting new interactions. And we appreciate that interaction probably more than we've ever done so before.
So I guess the chat over a coffee in the breakout area, it will still exist.
Yes, I believe it will, maybe at a distance in the short term. It's going to take us a while to adjust to this new normal. But as I said at the beginning, I think we as human beings, we want to get together and we're stronger together. So I do
Yeah,
believe, yes,
absolutely.
we have coffees.
I think a lot of people, I think the majority of people would say the same thing, that we've missed that interaction. So that leads quite nicely onto whether we see this as a short-term response to necessity, or is it a permanent, does it have a permanent implication? Imogen, what would be your sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting question in terms of the immediate measures and things around kind of cleanliness, social distancing. I think that's really going to depend on how long the aftershock lasts. I think there is a sort of an element of shock in the air, people having to adjust to this, what we're now calling the new normal. I think one of the really interesting challenges in the short term is that we've spent years trying to design the workplace to prompt serendipitous encounters, bump zones, these very meandering circulation paths that bring us together. And in the immediate term, we're really going to be trying to do the opposite of that. So maybe it's going to be one-way circulation, very kind of strict regulation about how you move around and how you can talk to people. But I think there's still such a strong link between interaction and innovation and all of those kind of discussions that we just need to have with each other, that I think I agree with Pernille broadly, that the workplace is really going to have to become that kind of heart. More broadly, I suppose, in terms of working patterns, I think the thing I've been really thinking about recently is hoping that it shifts us a bit towards a slightly more balanced approach to work and life. As we can see on this call now, we're all Roger Kelly, having his kids run into the VC famously on BBC News. We've all sort of seen a little bit of each other's personal lives. I think that's making companies look quite hard at how they help employees balance work and sort of other life commitments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, in a way, it's kind of counterintuitive to what we do, isn't it? Pernille, what are your thoughts on that as well?
Well, I think short term it's going to be about a rota system. I don't think we'll all go back in one sort of flood of people back to work. I think there'll be work patterns, as Imogen has said, and we will sort of plan who's going to be together and when. There'll be more thought about who's in the office and why they're there. I think cleanliness is going to be a big thing in the office. But a positive is, as Resonate, we tread lightly on the environment, and I think there will be less commuting, and maybe we will have sort of shift patterns and people will go into the office at different times. So I think we will see a seismic shift in the community and the commuting on a daily basis, and it will be about mindfulness and health and concentrated work when you're in the office.
Yeah, and I guess we've all seen the impact on the environment from the sort of the reduction in commuting and air travel and road travel. So it's clearly having a positive effect somewhere, isn't it? So Pernille, Resonate Interiors obviously specialise in creating memorable environments for the workplace. What do you think people will value about spaces in the future?
Well, yeah, we do personalise space. We want it to reflect a business, the values of that particular business. And I think everyone has been working in their personal space now for quite a while. And so they will want to see that within the office. I think it will become more personal. And it will, as I said, reflect values of an organisation and support deep collaboration. But there will also be private concentrated spaces for people to work. We are quite fortunate, us three, I know that we can concentrate at home, but some can't. So the office can also provide that space for people to think and to come up with new ideas. So I think it will always be a catalyst for growth and change.
So you see it as quite a sort of positive step in a way in terms of design?
Yes, I do. I think, as we said, we're not going to have cookie cutter approach to office design anymore. I think it'll be very specialist according to each organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Imogen, as the co-author of the book Life of Work, What the Office Design Can Learn from the World Around Us, are there any industries that you think we can learn from to help us navigate the way we approach design going forward? Do you think we'll see even more collaboration across the industries?
I hope so. I mean, as you said sort of at the beginning, this is an absolutely unprecedented situation. So there's an element more than ever of, we're all learning together, I think, at this point. And what the book was about there was really, yeah, exactly, you said, learning from different industries. So one of the things we looked at was theatre design. So what can theatre design tell us about creating really psychologically enriched environments? And I absolutely believe in that interdisciplinary approach. I've been looking quite a lot at the response to the pandemic from the wider design community, and I think there's some really interesting collaborations happening across different industries and areas of expertise, and I think we should absolutely carry that forward with us. And I think that's about, as we return to, you know, a sort of a new version of normal, keep looking at what people are doing really well and what we can learn from it. I guess an obvious example is the hospitality industry is absolutely going to be faced with this immediate challenge of creating really kind of rich social experience while maintaining social distancing. So, you know, if they can solve that, what can we learn from that? It's about those kinds of things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess, Pernille, from a design perspective, have you seen more collaboration going forward since this all started?
Yes, definitely, and much more on a global level than we've ever had before. I've had conversations with, you know, people in America, Poland, Scandinavian countries, and it's really interesting. And as Imogen said, it's about best practice. We're all learning together. Interestingly, different countries have a slightly different approach. But we're sharing ideas, and it's actually a really exciting time in terms of opportunity. For global sharing, and we've all actually, in a strange way, become sort of closer together via Zoom and various other interactions.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, particularly in the UK, we've become quite used to the idea of giving up personalised space at work. Do you think that that might change once people have spent more than a significant amount of time working in an environment that they can control and personalize their own space? Pernille, you're kind of, you know, you're obviously designing new workspaces. What's your take on that one?
Well, I think shared desk space is going to become more prevalent. And actually, it's been proven that it's more hygienic, because if you leave a clear desk at night, obviously it gets cleaned thoroughly every evening, and then it's fresh for the new person to come in the next morning. So I think that'll be interesting, and people will almost expect that. So our personalisation will come digitally via our phones and our laptops, and that's the way we will personalise our own space. And we will be sharing it in a much greater format.
Imogen, have you got anything do you sort of agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think the sort of the concern about cleanliness is unlikely to go anywhere anytime soon.
No, absolutely.
On that one. I mean, it was already a concern, you know, in shared space in the office, and this is only going to heighten that. I mean, at UnWork, we believe very strongly in kind of creating a great sort of end user experience through the integration of space and technology, and I think there's real potential in using kind of technology and that digital experience to create that kind of personalization. So, you know, workplace apps now, they're developing technologies that allow you to save your settings, kind of personalize your preferences, and really follow you around the space. When you walk into a room, and it can set it up to your individual kind of preferences, from lighting and temperature to digital art on screens. So that kind of, you know, follow me approach, I think there's real potential there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I guess now more than ever, we're having to rely so heavily on technology to sort of get us through the working day. And I guess with everyone checking their connection and making sure their broadband width is up to speed, and working out whether to use Teams or Zoom or any other sort of VC portal that there are. Do you think this will change the way we approach the relationship between technology and the workspace once we can go back to the office? Imogen, we'll come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I hope so. I think space and technology have traditionally been treated quite separately. So starting to look at them as, you know, fundamentally interlinked, and how they can best support the other. And there's always an element of being at home to a degree of making do. So to bringing people into the office, it's really going to be about creating, I think, a very seamless integration between space and technology. I think one of the things that this is doing for all of us, as you said, we're absolutely reliant on Zoom and all these sort of digital technologies for collaboration, that is sort of creating a level of uptake that perhaps we haven't seen before, kind of a more general comfort level with talking and communicating and collaborating in this way, that I think will be brought into the office. And just I guess sort of one more thing that we've been thinking about a lot recently, I think it'd be really interesting to see if it changes our acceptance around new technologies like biometrics. And quite rightfully, there have been lots of ongoing debates and concerns around things like privacy, kind of data ownership. People are a little bit tentative about that. But on the other hand, if we want to develop spaces where you can really interact without having to touch surfaces that everyone might have made contact with, we're going to have to look at controlling space through things like apps, kind of biometric entry to buildings, touchless lifts, all of those kinds of things that have been sort of in development currently.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess maybe even more sort of use of AI. I mean, Pernille, what's your feelings on that?
Well, yes, I absolutely agree with Imogen. I think the technology will be more prevalent, and I think it will be more accepted. It will be very useful for estate managers, portfolio managers and property managers, but also for employees to see who is in and who has booked in or logged in for that week, so that they can then program the interactions they want to have during that week. So I think if it's used in the right way, it'll be hugely beneficial for everyone. Heat mapping and sensors and all of those, I do think, will become the new normal, and our office spaces will become more intelligent because of it. And then it's not about, we're not trying to override the privacy for anyone, but trying to make our buildings much more intelligent and reactive to people's needs and the space that they need within the office.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like, this has sort of been the catalyst to move things forward a little bit, doesn't it? And I guess from a personal perspective, and maybe your own work perspective, has it changed the way that you communicate? Imogen, how do you communicate with your team?
Primarily on Zoom, actually, although we also use Microsoft Teams and a couple of other kind of platforms as needed. We're in regular contact. We have sort of coffee catch-ups as well as team meetings. I think, obviously all of our interactions now are via this platform. And personally, I think it's really opened up communication in some ways with family. I think there's this really kind of this need to connect. Last weekend we had a Zoom call with family in the States, England and Germany, and we could perfectly well have done that before, but somehow it hadn't really occurred to anyone to do that. So that's been something personally quite positive that's come out of it that I hope will keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are finding the benefit of keeping in touch whilst we're socially distancing. It has brought people closer together. I mean, Pernille, what's your sort of take on that? Has it sort of changed the way you kind of operate, resonate and, catch up with friends?
Well, from a work perspective, exactly as Imogen said, Zoom, Teams, all of those have been absolutely invaluable. And thank goodness we can share screens. So we've been using that with clients. It's amazing how you can guide clients and colleagues around a drawing or some work or a virtual sample board. We're missing, in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis, we are missing the physical samples. That's one thing that we obviously can't do right now. But in terms of understanding my colleagues and maybe getting closer to them and having great synergy and support in the team, it's stronger than it's ever been at Resonate, and it's a wonderful gift actually through all of this that we've been given. And then on a personal level, exactly the same, speaking to friends in France and Denmark and all over the world really, suddenly it has brought us closer together, and sharing little hobbies and things that we've been doing is as I said, it's a real blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. So some positives, let's face it. So I can see that we've had a couple of questions from our listeners. If I go to the first question, I can't see who it's actually come from. It's a question around mental health and well-being, which have been high up on the agenda for companies for a couple of years. So going forward, do you think that psychology will have a larger part to play in building design to account for well-being? Pernille, you've obviously had experience of working with a workplace psychologist on a previous project. How do you see that?
I think it's invaluable now. We had it on a project about 9-10 months ago, and it really helped sort of design the office, you know, it gave us some pointers and some hints as to how we design the office, what was really, really important to people. But now as people go back, they're going to come back with a legacy of some being on their own, some being with lots of family, you know, very different stories as they go back into the workplace. And I think that psychological support will be really important. And so that people readjust to getting back sort of into a society and sharing, you know, their values.
Yeah, absolutely. Imogen, I guess you feel the same?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, you know, we're becoming more aware than ever of the need to provide psychological support as, you know, support mental health. You know, particularly given all the stresses that people are currently working under, and then how we kind of support them. I think I sort of talked earlier about this sort of feeling of aftershock, you know, how you support people coming back into the workplace to do things that they've been told very strongly shouldn't be happening for you know, however many more, you know, weeks or months that's the case for. I think something that's interesting as well, I think we're becoming, obviously things like nudge theory, those sort of behavioural psychologies have been, you know, they're sort of long standing. We've always sort of tried to incorporate them a bit in the workplace, but I think people are becoming more and more aware of those kinds of approaches as well. All the things around, you know, sort of hand washing and trying to encourage the right behaviours in this, you know, do follow through to potentially all aspects of our life. And I think it's really interesting to think about how that becomes more and more a part of kind of workplace design, and helping us create spaces that are quite intuitive. You know, people aren't being told what to do, but just sort of gently helped in fulfilling the tasks that they need to carry out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can see another question we've had. Prior to COVID, design change was focused on the change in generations. Do we think this will continue to have an impact on workplace design, or has this global pandemic changed this? I guess, Pernille, that's kind of one for you.
Yes, I don't. It's a really interesting question, actually quite a difficult one, I think, to answer. I don't think we're going to see the design in workplace around generations anymore. I may be wrong, and I'm not an expert at this, but I think it's more about people's attitude to the work and the commute and those sorts of things, and how comfortable they feel going into work rather than what generation they are from. Yes, there will probably be change, but I'm afraid I don't have a really good answer to that one. I think it's quite a difficult question.
I don't think any of us have the answer to what's going on right now, and this, I guess that's why we're having a conversation. I mean, Imogen, do you agree with Pernille?
Yeah, I think there's sort of a nuanced view in that. I think there are some things around, so particularly sort of younger people coming into the workplace, especially I think those who've now been coming through universities where they're delivering learning online. It's becoming more and more digital experience, are going to have expectations around that carrying through into the workplace. But equally, I think that there are some needs that are universal, you know, no matter what generation you're from, and that goes back to, you know, that sort of well-being, our psychological responses to space. I think there are some things that absolutely universal human needs that cut across generational differences, that it's really important we take account of and plan for.
Absolutely. Another question we've got, which is going back to the technology and the platforms that we are using to communicate, such as Zoom, Google Hangouts, Teams. In the future, how do we see this technology being incorporated into design to enable people to have a better collaboration experience on a global level whilst in the office? Pernille, we'll come to you first on that one.
So I think we have all got very used to this Zooming.
We're doing okay.
Yeah. I think we have got used to it, and it will again become the new normal. So if one person is in the office and one person is out of the office, we will use this as a platform going forward. I don't believe it will go away. And we want to make sure that everyone is enabled and there aren't stresses around the IT and the broadband and the Wi-Fi. So I think that will again become hugely important to everyone, that access is easy and secure. You know, there's IT hygiene that I think will be very important for us all, you know, at home and at work. And as I said earlier, I think globally we're all pulling together. You know, Zoom is I believe it's an American product, and we're all using it very happily and well. So I think it's going to bring the world globally, almost to a smaller place.
Yeah, absolutely. Imogen, do you agree with that as well? I think everyone would, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, all this, as Pernille said, this sort of global collaboration happening. And there are some technologies out there that have really been developed to start enabling that. We're starting to see, you know, just sort of simple things like 360-degree cameras that make it a bit easier for someone who's remote or kind of in a different region to really take part in a more interactive and kind of collaborative discussion. In terms of really kind of remote and global collaboration, I think actually that kind of interactive co-creation kind of work is something is perhaps a challenge that we've still yet to absolutely crack. And I've been doing lots of experimenting with sort of different platforms that essentially replace the post-it note, and as yet none of them feels like it's quite managing it. So I think there is still some things where I'm going to want to be in a room with someone.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
So we've got a few more questions here as well. Do you think we are going to see virtual reality offices? And Pernille, right, and both of you, I guess, do you know of any organisations that work fully virtually? Pernille, we'll come to you first.
Well, virtually, we do know some project managers very well that don't have an office base, and they collaborate very well, and they're hugely successful and growing. So I think there will be a virtual office. There somehow will be a hub for them to get together, even if that is virtually. So I think we will see more and more of that. We're doing more sort of three-dimensional walkthroughs, so you can virtually walk through a space as we design it. I think that will become really important as building visits may become slightly less. So yes, I believe it will.
Imogen, anything to sort of add to that? Do you know any other organisations that you deal with that are totally virtual?
I think that's just a really interesting question. We don't deal currently with any organisations that are totally virtual. There is one, and I've blanked on the name, so I'll have to get back to you on that one. But they do have an entirely virtual distributed workforce. They don't have a physical space. They all work separately. They collaborate online, and a certain number of times a year they bring the company together. So you still have that opportunity to bond and connect face to face. But the rest of the time they are distributed. I'll follow up with the name and the case study that I was reading on that to everyone who's watching. In terms of an entirely virtual office, sort of VR office, I think it's really interesting because in theory it does give us the opportunity and the potential to feel more like we're in the same space. It would be interesting to see how you would manage that, I think, at home, because a lot of that work has been around augmented reality. When you're in the workplace, you can put in that kind of technology that supports you to have a really great experience doing that. Things like telepresence rooms are starting to move towards that, feeling co-located whilst you're separate. I think it'll also depend on being able to develop a technology. So my personal experience with VR is that it makes me really motion sick because my body isn't feeling what I'm seeing. So
yes,
you have to tackle that problem, which would be an interesting one to solve.
I'd just like to add on that one actually, that what I think we found a lot with all these video conferencing is, you know, we are all in our private spaces wherever they may be, the kitchen, the bedroom, this, and people like that personality, and that's one of the things we touched on earlier. I think it would be a shame if we were all speaking from the same virtual reality. I think individuality is hugely important, and we mustn't lose that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps a personalisable virtual reality.
Yeah, there you go. Yes,
absolutely. So we've got just one more time for one more question. How do you think the workplace etiquette will change after this period of transformation? With a caveat that, will we all wear less formal clothes to the office or stop shaking hands? What's your thoughts? Imogen, we'll come to you first.
I think so. I mean, I think just human contact is important ultimately, but I do think it's going to take a long time for that to feel sort of socially acceptable again, to reach out and just shake someone's hand without having to think twice about it. Informality, I think there might be, as I said, we're all really seeing into people's private lives, and I'm definitely finding on calls it's feeling more and more comfortable and acceptable to maybe not completely go in a sweatshirt, but not dress quite as formally as you might in the office. I think that started to break down some of those kind of learnt behaviours and traditions around kind of how we dress and approach each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually nearly out of time. So I just wanted to thank you both for sharing your thoughts with us today. And our conversation this lunchtime has really got my mind thinking about how we can better create harmonious spaces where people A, feel safe, and B, can collaborate better whilst being productive. So just finally on that subject of productivity, I have a question for you both. It's obviously brought out lots of people's hobbies that we've never really had time for, and to sort of expand our horizons and develop new ones. Me, I found a newfound passion for yoga, so thank you, Adrian, in Texas, as well as doing painting. Pernille, what has been your hobby that you've taken up again?
Well, at least a couple. I've been doing lots of upcycling. I've taken a couple of pallets from my neighbour and made a barbecue table. I've been making mosaics. And also learnt how to make concrete candlesticks. So
wonderful
variety, all creative, I have to say.
And Imogen, top that.
I'm not sure I can. I've absolutely joined ticking off the quarantine bingo by embarking on sourdough bread making. And we also realised a little while ago that we actually have more sewing machines in the house than people. So I've been making scrubs most recently.
That's great. That is really good. And I thank you so much. There's some really great hobbies there, and hopefully we've given our listeners some inspiration. So we'll be quite keen to know what you guys have been up to. But that's it for today. We just want to thank you all for joining in. We hope you've enjoyed listening and hopefully provided you with some food for thought. So please do feel free to drop us a line if you've got any further questions or we haven't covered anything. But for now, from Pernille, Imogen, Sasha and myself, thank you so much and have a great afternoon and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.